Hey, everybody, this is Brad Parnell, and you're listening to the Think and Grow Show. This is the podcast that's all about unlocking your potential, shifting your mindset, and creating a life of growth and impact. Whether you're looking to overcome obstacles, build resilience, or level up your thinking, this is the place for real conversations and actionable insights to help you push past limits and forge a stronger, more fulfilled version of yourself. So let's jump in, guys. I'm so excited to bring my guest, Brian Mendenhall, who's an integrative psychiatrist, onto the show today. Brian, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
Man, I am doing good. I am enjoying life. So Brian and I have gotten the chance to talk briefly a little back and forth. I am just super excited about this interview and this conversation. And I think you guys are going to love it too, just to hear some of what Brian does and how he helps people. And I think you'll have some good takeaways here. So first question, Brian, just to get started, I would love to know the story behind Mindforged Psychiatry. What inspired you to start this practice?
Well, sure. That's a great question. It's personal because I spent probably half of my life preparing for and working in a system that I eventually no longer believed in. And I decided, well, I could either stay in that system, and this is the standard psychiatry mental health system as a psychiatrist. I could either stay in that system and complain about it or do something different, and try to make some change. One of the biggest problems I saw with that system is really that it treats people like a diagnosis, a label, and with that label, you get a pill, you get sent out. It's very mechanistic, and people came into me with their whole lives and mind, body, spirit, brain, all of that. And that paradigm just doesn't work well for most. And so I was looking at, well, what is it about my folks that do get better? What can I pair off that doesn't make sense? And how do I make something that is more strength and resilience focused? So not a disease model, but more human focused. And that's where I have Mindforged. So it's kind of my own Frankenstein of a practice where I've gotten rid of the stuff that I don't like and incorporated things that I think works. And I pivot as I go, and it seems to be going pretty well. People are getting good results with it, and I'm pleased.
That's what I love about entrepreneurship is what you just shared too. You're able to take the things that you've seen work, and you didn't have to get permission, right? You're able just to take that and build it and practice it.
Yep, that's the beauty of it.
That's incredible. So what would you say, Mindforged Psychiatry, what's the biggest difference from you guys than from maybe some traditional mental health practices?
Yeah. Well, one is going to be the heart of our approach. So the heart of the approach is really resilience and strength-based. So it's going back to that, it's not a disease model approach. I'm not seeing somebody that is like, this is major depressive disorder, this is their code for billing, and this is the pill associated for billing. That's not what I'm doing. People come to me and maybe they're coming because they're stuck. They may not know exactly what's going on or what the problem is, but maybe they're stuck, maybe they're plateaued with their career, maybe they have history of depression and anxiety, but it's really my role to take a step back and to look at all of the various factors that come into play. And that takes a holistic approach. It takes I would say, a bottoms up and a top down kind of view at looking at the person, which means, and this is where the integrative aspect comes into play, I may be looking at what are some of the health factors that might be contributing to their mind and brain health, in a negative way. And as science has evolved, we've started to learn that all of these systems are interconnected more than we thought previously. And so if a person has an inflammatory condition, and they have anxiety, depression, or ADHD, well, you want to treat both. And so that may mean that I'm going to be working with some nutraceuticals to bring down inflammation or doing hands-on treatments. I'm an osteopath that helps improve circulation for that. Plus, I'm working with the standard treatment like medication management. But also one other aspect too is I'm big at working with the mind as well, in the sense that this is where we get into more of the resilience and growth-based aspect. And so I do a lot of mindfulness-based work. I've been a Zen meditator for, going on 2 decades now. So mindfulness is kind of my home. I use a lot of performance-based strategies related to that. We can get into some deep work as well, psychodynamic therapy, to get into unteasing old patterns that have kind of crept up on you. And you're kind of like, well, what the hell's going on right now? Like, why am I here now? And this thing keeps repeating itself thousands of times over. Well, we can get to that depth. Yeah,
that's amazing. I'm learning a lot about the mind as well, and super curious on, with some of the meditation you mentioned for Zen meditation, just for me to know, and maybe some of our listeners, could you maybe describe what's comprised of Zen meditation? What makes that unique?
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of a buzzword as well. So that can be a complex question, but essentially it's an ancient practice going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's a very simplified experiential type of practice of working with the mind. And so what we mean is that it's not so much about theory per se. It's not so much about what you think and with these ideas, but it's more so about doing and building things in a certain way through meditation, to where then you can have the clarity to do what you're meant to do what you need to do. So so the way I look at it is it's a lot of the meditative practices, for instance, like in Zen meditation, there's one maybe working with breath work and focusing on the breath. And the idea is you're using a body focus, a somatic focus. You could really use just about anything with your body, but you're using that to kind of ground and bring yourself back as you're observing the mind and not becoming so attached to this stream of thoughts that we constantly have. Because if you listen to your mind, if you opened up the hood and looked and saw all of the stuff that's going on, like even within a few seconds, we have a lot of random thoughts that occur, like different channels on a radio. And a lot of them don't make sense. Some of them make sense. Some of them we get attached to for different reasons, like emotionally we get connected to and we hold on to it and we run with it. Maybe that's a good idea, maybe not. But really one of the main essences of Zen is the fact that, well, you're not going to be able to control the fact that your mind is like that, but how do you manage it so it doesn't necessarily control you? And so using breath work to go back to that as a focus and as a strategy to grow and develop through these micro repetitions, kind of like working out, but for your brain, how do you get to where you can manage that to where on a day-to-day basis, you're able to not let all these little radio channels that don't make sense guide you in the wrong direction. And so it's not so much like me telling somebody like, this is who you are and who you're going to become. That's not my job, but it's about decluttering your mind and kind of clearing the way so that then you can do what you are meant to do. Like everybody has a special purpose. I believe that, God gave everybody skills and a certain personality and certain characteristics so that they can touch other people and do something really awesome. But how do you get rid of that clutter?
Mm. Yeah. So for practical application, if there's someone listening and they may be just needed, like, hey, what is the beginner 101 if they wanted to get into some meditative practices? What would you recommend for them?
Well, I would recommend, first of all, learning a little bit about it to understand there are a lot of misconceptions about what it is and what it isn't. And, it's like some people may look at it and say, well, is it a religious practice? Is it secular? Is it, and get hung up on all of that. And you'll find a million different interpretations. But Zen can be predominantly secular and some other aspects that can be religious. And that's a big differentiator with some of my folks. What I use is secular. So so the first thing is understanding kind of the theory and understanding the practice and doing a little bit of reading. It was Shunryu Suzuki was probably where I started out reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and really understanding, okay, this is what it's about, so on and so forth. But there are a lot of communities, of course, out there. But I would also tell people to be careful too, because there are self-proclaimed quote unquote gurus and a lot of people that can misguide a person as well.
Yeah, that's good feedback. So Brian, what kind of patients do you typically work with?
Well, yeah. So I would say it's a collection. There's a wide variety of folks that are defined by a certain mindset, it seems like. So most of the folks that I work with, I would say have the goal-oriented mindset, kind of a warrior mindset to life. These are people that set goals. They're energized by goals. Maybe they're getting stuck, but these are people that don't tend to get stuck in the victim mindset per se. That's not their mode. That's not their mentality. Now, of course, that mindset that I just described also has its, excellent perks, of course, in our society. It's like everybody thinks we want to be like that type A person. It has its dark underbelly as well. Has these things that you got to watch out for, certain characteristics like perfectionism, so on and so forth, self-criticism, all of that. But most of my folks are defined by that. And we're looking at, it could be executives, entrepreneurs, professionals, athletes, and really anyone that has that mindset and that's kind of driven and goal oriented. So I like to call them high octane people.
So high octane, I love it. High performers, high octane, high achievers. And I think that's a lot of our audience here. So my question is, what are some of the signs to look for? Like for high achievers, we're so much of just always moving forward, always going, just plowing through, sometimes not listening to the big signals in our brains of stop, slow down, get help. Usually by the time those alarm bells are going off, it's pretty far late in the game. So what would you recommend some things to be looking out for as like high achievers? What are some of the signs of maybe I should slow down or maybe I should work with a psychiatrist and get some help on these things?
Yeah. No, that's great because you really described one of the fundamental issues of, oh gosh, probably 75% of the people I see, like in a nutshell. And it goes back to that mind characteristic. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep on going. I'm not going to listen to the pain and I'm going to push through. Yeah. And that carries you so far. But your mind, your brain, just like any other body system, reaches a point where it becomes brittle. It reaches its like physiological barrier where you're starting to break it down and then you're degrading it. And it's like, well, okay, you don't want to get to that point. But let's start with when you get to that point, what does that look like? Yeah, absolutely, you need help. But that's where you're becoming sick. You're becoming physically ill because you're not getting the sleep. And we'll talk more about this in a bit, but you're not getting the sleep that you need. Maybe you're having you're having chronic headaches. Your stress levels are high. Stress kills if it's in a certain way. Okay. We'll talk about that in a bit too, because I'm very interested in that. But, if you have stress hormones going off all the time, so your cortisol's going off, then that's going to cause changes where it literally will shrink your brain over time. And if you don't believe me, look this up. It's pretty scary, creepy stuff. But also it dysregulates your metabolism and everything, which makes your body inflammatory, causes all kinds of other conditions. And as we know, a lot of the worst conditions that we think about, like the neurodegenerative conditions, are now finding to be linked to inflammation. And so I say, when it gets to where you're getting sick, you're feeling sick, because of your stress levels. Now, if you recognize it's because of anxiety, depression, what have you, perfectionism, great. But even if you don't, if it's just stress, still, you need to seek help, because that's damaging your body. And at some point, the whole deck of cards will collapse. Now, before then, before you get to that point, well, I would say some more subtle aspects are, let's say that you are getting stuck with your perfectionism, in the sense that it worked well for you for a while. This is a very common story. It worked well for you for a while. You got straight A's and you were able to set up your business, so on and so forth. But now it's getting to the point to where it's slowing you down because you're completely indecisive. Analysis paralysis. Well, maybe there's something else going on there. Maybe there's some sort of function that's related to anxiety that needs to be treated. Some people, we find out, well, it's like, surprise, you actually have obsessive compulsive disorder, which worked well for a while, but we need to rein this obsessive tendency and thought back in a little bit, because now you don't have any space to grow. You're plateauing, So I would say, if you feel like you're getting stuck because of your mind, in that way, sure. Another thing too is, if you're getting burnt out to the point to where you no longer enjoy things that you normally would, like you can't engage and enjoy those things that normally refreshed you, like hanging out with your kids, your family, connecting with them, playing your sports, what have you. Well, that's a big sign too, because you could be looking at depression at that point.
Yeah. Wow. Something you said earlier keeps popping back in my head, which I love. It's you can't necessarily control, and I might not be using the right words here, but it's not controlling, it's more about managing. So with our brain and the power of everything happening in there, we can't control exactly what happens, but what we can have control over is the management of what's happening up there. Is that right?
Yes. That's awesome. And I could talk for probably like an hour about this, but I'll try to keep it simple. But yes, so this idea of control is fascinating, especially with folks that are driven like us, like the audience. It's we think that we can control all of the variables and all of the factors externally and within ourselves, and then everything will be okay. Well, that's going to make you sick. That's going to make you ill at some point, because we only have so much bandwidth, emotionally, cognitively. There's 24 hours in a day. You're going to get burnt out. But also with this idea of control, oftentimes you are connecting yourself to an illusion of you're able to manage something that you really can't. And so it's almost like you're shadow boxing, or you're fighting ghosts. You're wasting your energy. So this idea of control, it's like, well, you have to let it go. And I'm not saying have no self-control, but I'm talking about the fact that there's very little that we can actually control. And if you bring it down to like the minute level, it's like, gosh, how can we control all these external factors, all of these people, all these other ideas outside of ourselves, when it's hard to control our own mind, even on the minute level? Okay, So give up the idea of control, but look at managing. And that gives you a little bit of an extra space and agency to work with what you need to without the criticism, without the self-blame, without the, fighting ghosts, so on and so forth. And so, for instance, I'll give an example so it's not so abstract. Let's say if you take a thought, this is about control. Like oftentimes when I get people to start meditating and understanding what's going on in their mind, they might have a thought of self-criticism. I am this, like, oh, I'm not meeting my goals today. I'm not going to meet this. I'm failing because I'm behind on this. Essentially, you're putting yourself at the center of that with that I, surrounding yourself with all kinds of emotional judgment, blame, all of that. You're attempting to control it. Your mind is attempting to control it. But what if you put it in a way where it's more so there is a deadline, there is blame, there is judgment. Take the I out of it, kind of decenter it a little bit. Okay, so you're not losing sight of the reality that, yeah, you've got stuff to do and so on and so forth, but you're not trying to clamp down and control it. It's essentially a way to free yourself so that you're not locked into something where you're wasting your energy. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. It's fascinating. I was listening to actually a podcast this morning, and it was talking about, kind of the idea too of almost reprogramming your mind through some meditation. So by doing visualizations and breath work and all those things. So I'm curious, I guess the concept of reprogramming, it's not the same as controlling, but that's almost a different way to say managing. Do you say that's more accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's more accurate because it's mostly about, like, some people get the misperception that, oh, okay, I'm going to clear my mind, quote unquote. Well, good luck with that. That's not going to happen until you're dead. Now, you're not going to clear your mind per se, but it's like, how do you change your position in space to whatever that is that's going on? And really, like, we're only, as far as I know, we're the only creatures out there that have that capacity with our brain to be able to think about what we're thinking and create that extra position in space to say, let me take a look back, and am I really thinking about this? Is my paradigm correct, or should I shift it? So that's really what it is. It's about positioning. It's not about squashing something or getting rid of it. It's like this is where mindfulness works very well for depression. And there are recent studies that came out with mindfulness-based cognitive therapy that shows that it works really well for preventing people from spiraling back into depression, when they have a history of it. And the idea there is that you're not getting rid of the emotion of sadness or depression. It's not like you're squashing it or getting rid of it. You're allowing it to exist. It's going to come and go. That's not the problem. The problem is not the depression. The problem is not the mood. The problem is when you have these thoughts that then attach to that, and then you spiral into all of this like rumination and thinking about this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. Like, oh, I'm bad. Oh, I did this. Oh, I should have done this better. They found through neuropsych testing that that's what gets people to really get into the deeper states of depression. It's not the mood. It's not the sadness. So it's our fact that we're trying to control it through those thoughts, through rumination, like our brain is trying to problem solve it, really. And that's what gets us into that state. So if you can decouple that, change your position from space, you're not getting rid of the reality that depression exists. You're not trying to control it. In fact, controlling it is what causes you to then get into those thought patterns that are unproductive and unhealthy.
Wow. Man, that is so enlightening and insightful. So I know, Brian, many high performers struggle with self-doubt, imposter syndrome. What are some of the ways you help them reframe their thinking when it comes to that self-doubt, imposter syndrome?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the first thing is people would be surprised to realize how common it is, because when you're in that state of mind, you're thinking, well, oh gosh, it's me. You become so egocentric, where you're thinking about yourself. I mean, that's predominantly one of the main issues with it. And you're so focused on yourself that you're thinking, oh, I'm the one. People are going to find out I'm a fraud. I'm not ready for this. I'm not prepared for this. I'm not ready for this level, so on and so forth. I. Well, the truth is it's super duper common, even at higher levels as well. As issues become, you're making bigger, higher stakes decisions, things become more complex. It still happens, but the folks at the higher levels, they find ways to manage it better than some of the newbies. And so you're not going to see it as much, but it's still there. So the first thing is recognizing, it's common. It's not you, that kind of takes the teeth out of it. And then once you get to that point, it's going to depend on what is really driving it? And that's where I usually try to dig in a little bit more about what is attached to that idea, of failure, of success. Because once you get into those ideas, sometimes a person might have an idea about success that was helpful to get them to a certain point, and they get to a certain place and it's no longer helpful. It's like you need to shift your mentality about what success or failure means. Like, for instance, maybe an individual has this idea of success means that I'm proving myself to show that I exist, I stand out, I'm no longer, in the back of the crowd. Oftentimes these ideas, by the way, come from childhood. It's all of the things that we repeat hundreds and hundreds of times over that become the big issues that people come to me for. It's never just a one-time event. And so you trace that back and it's like, where does that idea come from? Well, maybe it was helpful and it helped this individual strive, push themselves hard. They had to prove themselves. Okay, great. So now you made it to this level, but that's no longer useful. So what is it? Why are you still attached to that? How are you? And how can you shift that into some other mode? So that's one aspect. But the other part too is looking at of success and failure, because the imposter syndrome is also tied to this fear of failure. And it's like, man, you're number one, we're not going to ever be able to decouple success from failure. It's part of the same thing. Because if you think of the idea of success, you don't have success without knowing what the idea of failure is. One doesn't exist without the other, and vice versa. And people at the highest level of success, if you sat and you talked to them about all of their failures, they had a lot of failures. So I think that's the other part as well, is recognizing that failure it's not a bad thing. It's necessary. It's part of success as well. And that can take the fear out of it. But you also have to watch for the downstream effects of this too. It's not just looking at the past to build forward, but the imposter syndrome can also really run into some issues of like perfectionism and avoidance. Really cutting yourself off from doing things that you normally could do or that are in your capacity, and so you don't grow as much as you can. It's like those are the two. That's like the two-headed monster of it, is the avoidance and perfectionism.
Wow.
And if you are noticing that that's coming up, even before you say, oh, I have imposter syndrome, it's like, well, you might want to check yourself and just see if that's what's going on. And if that's the case, sometimes it's helpful to actually look back and do some thinking, some cognitive restructuring, like sit there and say, well, okay, what do I have? What have I done, that has actually pushed me to this point, that has gotten me here? What are my credentials to get to this, that, or the other? What strengths do I have that really shine through? And this may sound cheesy, but this is where you can get into like self-affirmation as well, to remind yourself, especially if you're going through these episodes where you're like, okay, I'm not feeling quite ready. I'm getting into that pattern of avoidance and perfectionism. Remind yourself. It's classic cognitive behavioral therapy, really, but it's a way to kind of keep yourself in check.
That's great. What an awesome answer. For self-affirmations, do you have any sort of recommendation if someone's never done that before? Maybe they kind of have an idea of self-affirmations like I am blank. What would be a good starting point if someone is hearing this and maybe they want to start doing some self-affirmations because they have imposter syndrome? Is there a good amount of time to spend in self-affirmation, or a certain amount of self-affirmations people need to work on creating?
Yeah. Well, I would say, with everything, with all of this, it's all about structure and it's all about repetition. So it's about putting in the grind. So it's nothing big. It's not hard work, like moment by moment, but the hard work is just keeping the consistency, really. You got to show up. And so it's something like this. With self-affirmations, I would say, well, you first want to, like most people find that they'll have the trouble when they wake up first thing in the morning and their mind is going. And then they're starting to think about all the stuff they have to do and their failures, this, that, or the other. And I'm like, that's the perfect moment right when you wake up. That's when to do it. And it only needs to be literally like a minute. It doesn't need to take long. And what I've had some folks do is I've had them literally write down 3 to 5 different things that if they were looking at themselves like they were their best friend and they were looking at themselves and saying, hey, hey, Brad, why are you thinking like this? You are awesome at this. You're a rock star at this. You can do this. You've done this before and you've done this and no one else in your family's ever done it. Like, write those down, put them on your bedstand. And when you wake up and you're automatically feeling that, it's like, yeah, look at that. just for like a minute or so. It doesn't take long, but put some thought into it and then move on with life.
Man, what a good practice. I think everyone needs that.
I do.
I don't know, waking up, reading through a list like that, you'd ever be too big for that. I feel like that's a great way to start.
Yeah, and waking up's a great time because it's like you have that, I don't know if you ever noticed, but when you wake up, you have that quick moment where you actually don't have all of the declutter for just maybe a few seconds. So you have that openness where the world hasn't come in yet. You haven't gotten on your phone to check the news while you're taking a dump, all of that stuff, and people are texting you. Before all that chaos comes in, you actually have that peace. And it's like, well, that's the moment to then let in some of this as well before the negativity comes in.
Something you said I think is really powerful about what other people say about you. So I think it's one thing to, our self-limiting beliefs about what we do believe about ourselves versus go ask the people closest to you and just be authentic and say, hey, I am trying to become better in my thought life and I'm working on some self-affirmations. Would you give me a statement or two about myself that you really believe that I can tell myself? And would you recommend that as an idea of not just from ourselves, but maybe getting feedback from those around you to help with affirmations?
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. I would say with that, make sure that it's someone who is authentic. And what I mean is that usually we'll have that one, maybe two people within our circle that not only can they give us praise, but they're allowed to give us the real feedback of what we're doing wrong. Because if we have affirmation or praise from someone that's not really authentic, then it really doesn't mean anything to us. So it has to be from the right person. It has to be that person where you can tell them like it is and they're not going to get butthurt. They can tell you like it is as well. This person keeps it real. For me, it's my wife. She keeps me in check all the time.
Yeah.
Other people, though, you might notice that some people will automatically, that's their default mode. They'll praise you. Other people might automatically criticize you. That's life. Those are not the people to check in on, and those are not the people to really care about their opinions.
That's good. That's great feedback. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mental resilience. Dr. Mendenhall. So what advice would you give that high octane, high performance individual to help build mental resilience in the face of stress, burnout, or setbacks?
Okay, so those are, well, there's a few different things. So I guess we'll address the setbacks. I would say, okay, that deals with the concept of failure and success. So it's very simple. It's failure is necessary for success. Let's not uncouple it. We need to be able to lean into our failure, lean into our suffering. Don't be afraid of it. Don't avoid it. It is what it is. Oftentimes, that's the next door to go through. And that takes a certain type of awareness. It takes a certain type of maturity of yourself, of your ego, to look at yourself and say, yeah, this is where I am. It's not where I want to be. I need to get to a level 9 or 10 with this. Let's say if it's with exercising, it's like, gosh, I can only do 5 push-ups. Oh my God, I'm out of shape. Okay, you have to have the reality to recognize, that, yeah, you're okay, sure, you're failing, whatever, but just more so recognize where you're at without judging yourself. That's the first thing, and recognize that in order for success to exist, there has to be the failure, and then you get to work. So I don't look at failure as such a bad thing. It's oftentimes a signal to us that whatever it was that we were wanting, everything wasn't ready for us yet, or we weren't ready for that. We need to pivot, and there's more work for us to do. Okay. Now with the stress, with the burnout, or the resiliency, it's like, well, okay, what can you do? I would say that the biggest factor, if I looked at prioritization, is sleep. Treat your sleep like a baby, guard it. Okay. And that gets into a complex, very kind of complex topic of all these different things you can get into with getting your sleep right, with sleep hygiene. But if you look at, there's some well-validated studies, for instance, with even just performance, for instance, with sleep. And if you're losing, and they did this with athletes, and if you're losing a half hour, an hour, 2 hours of sleep, they could literally see how often people are missing free throws and stuff like that in basketball. And wow. It's incremental. So we're talking about oftentimes these high octane people will think that, oh, okay, if I do more and do more and do more, and then you're cutting away with sleep, you're going to do better because you're getting more done. Well, your performance is really declining because it's not about managing your time. It's about managing energy. And you're going to be running on 6 cylinders instead of 8 cylinders the next day. You may not realize it. So that plays a role with resiliency as well, because eventually you're going to get burnt out. So I would say managing your sleep. And then on the other end of the spectrum, like the other underbelly of that, is manage your nutrition as well, because your brain is a high performance, delicate machine. And it needs, I mean, it's the fanciest supercomputer out there, and it needs so many different nutrients, micronutrients to stay healthy. You want the inflammatory factors to be reduced. So what we're talking about, if you wanted to go like optimally, what's going to feed your brain the best so it runs the best? Whole foods diet. Your Mediterranean diets are anti-inflammatory. There's something called a MIND diet, MIND, for the brain. And that is basically taking the Mediterranean diet and what was good about that, and then adding on some extra stuff to help prevent cognitive decline, like blueberries, walnuts, etc. But my main point is treat your brain like a machine, because when people get burnt out and they feel like they're not resilient, usually that's because they're burning out their brain, on some level. So it's like sleep, nutrition. And then if you look at building resilience, this is awesome. I love this topic because I don't know if anyone has heard about some of the recent studies about this center in your brain that deals with resilience and grit that they discovered recently. It's the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So it's in the brain. And what's awesome is they found out that you can actually grow it like a muscle by developing it bit by bit by bit. With small daily routines. And when you do that, then that part of the brain helps you be more resilient to stress gradually over time, but also will help you with regulating your emotions, which we could all use. And it could help you with processing, thought, all of that. And by doing that, it's kind of interesting because it's like the grit center of the brain, or the anti-snowflake center, as I like to refer to it. What you have to do, and you have to do something that sort of sucks every day. Not like horrible, but you need to sit there and think about something that you don't like doing. Like, for instance, let's say like I like to do Muay Thai kickboxing, but there are some things that I absolutely hate, with the exercise training part, like footwork drills, because they make my legs burn, my calves burn, they're boring. But well, guess what? That's what I need to do. And so the idea of evaluating something in your mind and saying, well, this is going to be difficult, but it's going to pay off. You do that little thing, and then that helps it grow. And then you do it again the next day, and then you do it again the next day. And there's a lot of ways to do that. For some people, it may not be physical. It may be something like if they hate doing marketing and outreach. Okay, well, then you make your list of people that you need to do your outreach to, and you do that. It's like, it sounds very simple, but it's like you find that thing where your mind evaluates it as, okay, this will probably have some payoff. I should do it, and I hate it. Do it.
Wow.
Yeah, do it again.
And those daily brick by brick doing hard things grows that part of the resilient brain little bits at a time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So it's pretty.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, because we used to not think that the brain could actually grow. And this, and this changed a while back, where we started to learn that the nerve cells in the brain are constantly trying to grow and sprout off. And there's so much potential for change, but you have to take advantage of it. And you have to have the right substrates on your brain, the right environment, and do the right things to optimize that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think about, as you're explaining that, Dr. Mendenhall, I'm thinking about, the group of guys that I work out with almost every day of the week, with our alarms going off at 4 something in the morning.
Yes.
Getting up in the early, whether it's 20 degrees or 50 degrees, it's getting up early, doing the hard things, just getting it over first thing in the morning. And then I'm thinking about, man, this is a great opportunity to get my wife to say yes to a cold plunge, get a cold plunge for the garage, do the hard thing every morning. I can't imagine cold plunging ever gets easier. I look at guys like Tony Robbins and all of his homes around the world. And every home, he's built a little cold plunge system. And he had a podcast I was listening to the other day, and it's funny because he said, I never wake up looking forward to jumping in a cold plunge, but I do it every single day. I've mechanically trained my brain to do it because I know how I'm going to feel afterwards, but it sucks every time. It sucks.
Yeah. And that's, and our bodies are like physiologically geared to hate that. I mean, all you have to do is step in the shower and you think it's hot and it's ice cold, and you kind of get a little bit of sensation of that, where your body locks up freezes
Yeah.
up and you can't breathe. And I mean, it sends your body into panic. But yeah, so that getting up in the morning, regardless, rolling out of bed and going running like a crazy man, 5 a.m. or whatever, it's like, absolutely. No, that's how you do that. And then part of that too is, and you alluded to this, is kind of a hack, is you get out of your head. It's what we call good old behavioral activation. There's a whole psychotherapy based on that, in psychiatry and psychology, where the idea is that the emotions, feelings, and thoughts and behavior are connected. But if you want to improve your feelings, then start with the behavior. And so what you do is you get out of your head, and even if you're thinking, oh man, this is going to be cold outside, it's dark, I don't want to do this, you just don't listen to it, you get up and do. And then once you do, then you're going to feel better. The feelings follow. So you can apply that to just about anything.
All right. So Dr. Mendenhall, I know the mental health field is evolving. I'd be curious, like, what new treatments or technologies are you excited about?
And I love the fact that you use the word evolve, because my favorite new treatment takes us back to the Stone Age, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
We have all these fancy new pills, and you'll see them on commercials, and they promise you, like, you're going to have happiness, utopia, all of this stuff. No, that's not where it's at. Psilocybin. If you follow psilocybin, it's been, in the pop news and media, all of that. It's actually going through the whole FDA process of getting approved. And my assumption is it's probably going to be approved soon, within the next year or two, for use. But psilocybin is a psychoactive ingredient in certain mushrooms. Now, I do have to give a disclaimer. I don't want your listeners to go out and start collecting mushrooms right now, like Dr. Mendenhall told us to. No, don't do that, please. But what they found is that, and this is what's fascinating about it, is you can get a profound effect on treatment of depression. This is where it really shines so far in studies, with just one treatment dose. And if you think about that, people take antidepressants for years and years and years, and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to work. But what we're seeing is that in a very controlled environment, and when I say controlled, we're talking, it's like you're taking a fairly robust dose, of psilocybin, where they know that's exactly what's in it. It's unadulterated. You're there with a therapist or somebody who can work with the special type of therapy involved with kind of reintegrating the mind and stuff like that. And it's like an 8-hour deal, and you take that dose, and what they're finding is that it gives a rapid response to treating depression, and then weeks out and possibly even further, the people are still not depressed. And that's incredible. And, and part of it, it works with serotonin. Of course, a lot of the medications that we use work with that as well, but it's not that simplistic. They also find that it works with a part of the brain called the default mode network, which, if you ever bored and have insomnia, look up all of the interesting stuff about where that's implicated. And so the idea is that it's like a reset button, to the way I look at it, maybe unclutter, all of that extra garbage that you carried with you, that you've collected with you, and then get you kind of set back to yourself. And then you have somebody there who hopefully knows about personality integration, so things don't go too wily. And there you go. But the results look great, in my opinion. And I very rarely ever say that about medicine. Usually it's like, oh, it's just a little bit above placebo, or, so on and so forth. And the side effects are minimal. So I'm optimistic about that. It's non-invasive. People are coming out from the studies with good responses, and they don't have to take a med every day when they do that. I mean, I'm assuming there's going to be some people that probably also are going to be using other treatments for depression as well, concurrently. But that being said, I think that that's something to watch for in the next year or two. They're already doing it in big research studies, and it's already kind of leveled up through the FDA process.
Yeah. And just to repeat that again, what's the name of that technique?
Psilocybin. Yeah. Psilocybin. Yeah, it starts with PSI. Psilocybin.
Okay. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, magic mushrooms, people will talk about it and call it magic.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Very
going
cool.
on in psychedelic medicine right now, because we already have ketamine. As people are using ketamine, like IV ketamine in particular. It can be very effective for rapid treatment of depression, maybe not so much long-term. MDMA they tried, but that pooped out, in the studies. But psilocybin is really the one to watch, I think.
Very interesting. So would you be able to share maybe a success story without revealing anyone's identities, but maybe talk about one that you're really proud of or that sticks out in your mind that illustrates some of the impact of what you do?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So and the way, I mean, I have to preface this by saying that like success in my business is rarely like, oh wow, like you're healed, all of a sudden. It doesn't work like that. It's usually a gradual process. In order for it to actually last and for it to work, it's a gradual change, because that's how the brain works, that's how behavior works, that's how the neurons work. So it's almost like gardening over time. It takes persistence and patience. If you ever want to be a psychiatrist, you have to have that kind of patience. But this is someone, and this one's been one of my funner cases lately, not to dehumanize anything, but we're looking at an executive. And this was an individual who has really a lot of strengths and a lot of skills. And personally, they've built themselves up from nothing, a fairly successful business, and they are in the process of expanding fairly rapidly nationally. And they feel like they've plateaued. They have some other kind of mental health conditions in the background they've been diagnosed with over the years, related to mood and attention, like ADHD and anxiety. And they just feel like they have plateaued and they need new skills to get them to this next level. So very vague stuff. But that's the beauty of my practice, is people don't need to come in with X, Y, or Z. They can just say, yeah, I'm stuck. What do you think? And we can work through it, And so with this individual, it's like, well, once I start digging in, I start finding out, like most folks that are high performing, there's a lot going on in their mind, that a lot of things they've collected over the years with these functions and ideas and thoughts that are helpful, but a lot of them are kind of unnecessary right now, but also causing that person to get burnt out. And that inside their mind, if you were to take off the cap and watch it, it's just like, go, 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 go. And we're talking. I remember they told me, well, I check my email 90 something times a day. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
oh my gosh, I would have a stroke if I did that.
Yeah.
That's just to give you an idea. But, people get into this kind of mode where more, faster. And you're adding, but you need to go through and take out and pull out some of the weeds in that garden to let other stuff grow. That's just how it goes. And at some point you will plateau. And so with this person, the first thing that we did was actually work with a type of meditation that works with awareness of recognizing, well, what is actually going on in your thoughts? Because when somebody is stuck in that mode where they're going so fast, they're always doing, and they don't really notice, like, what is it like to, and it's very uncomfortable to do this too, to actually sit and actually observe without doing anything to or with those thoughts. And then this individual, they have a beautiful mind, and they come back and they're like, wow, I didn't realize how much crap was going on in my head. And I'm like, exactly. Let's work on cleaning that out. And we started working with other aspects through mindfulness-based approaches to get to where the person can now take their hand on the lever, and go from that doing mode to being mode, being mode. We built that up over weeks, and then we started adding some skills, some performance-based breathwork type of skills they can use in the moment when things are really keyed up and stressful throughout the day, to where they can then address stressful situations like meetings and stuff like that and feel much more regulated. And they come back and they're like, wow, that's really working. We're getting somewhere. And in the meantime, also some of the other aspects, we work with, this person they have a condition, a medical condition that is inflammatory. So I work with some of the nutraceuticals like curcumin and stuff like that to work with that, omega-3 fatty acids with fish oil, work with cleaning up their regular psychiatry medications a little bit. Gosh, this just gives you a window into like one example. It's all individualized. And this person, they've gone through some setbacks, but as you do when you're going through rapidly expanding, but and this is where the success is, they were able to manage all of that probably better, I think, than they thought that they could, which is great to see, because it's like, really, they did 95% of the work. And it's awesome to sit there and see, well, okay, I'm just helping them maybe, see what's useful, what's not, clean this out, so on and so forth. But when they are using their own capacity, their own strength, and they're cleaning out some of that junk, and then they're able to see, wow, I did that. It's like, yes, that's change. So now you have authentic change. Now you can build on that, and that's great to see. So
that's fantastic. What a cool, that's a great case study too. I think again, a lot of high octane, high performance individuals on here. There's a lot of good takeaways from that story. And speaking of takeaways, we're going to do the final 4 hot takes, practical takeaways for listeners. So Brian, I'm gonna read you these 4 questions, and then we'll kind of do a quick hot take on them, and then we're gonna wrap up with talking about where people can connect with you, how they can learn more. And thanks for providing such incredible insight. I think your depth of knowledge and your willingness to share is very appreciative. So thank you for being willing to share and enlighten all of us.
Enjoyed it.
All right, so let's go through these hot take final questions. So Dr. Mendenhall, what are 3 things our listeners can do today to improve their mental well-being?
Okay, 1, I'm going to go back to sleep. Take a hard look at your sleep and your sleep patterns and treat your sleep like a baby. Don't let anybody mess it up. Make sure that you have a settle down, a wind down routine that is boring. Turn off your phone for a good hour or so before bed. Read a boring book. I don't care. Have a routine to settle down. But what's most important is actually wake up at the same time every morning, and that's for sleep. And that's because a part of our brain that is our clock throughout the day, our internal clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, it's kind of cool. It collects data all throughout the day of when did I wake up? When was the first time I spoke with somebody? Like social interaction. How much exercise did I get? How much cognitive stimulation? And then by the time it's bedtime, it says, oh, okay, I'm ready. Let's send off the other chemicals to go to sleep. But it's most sensitive to the time you wake up. So you gotta, and that's even on the weekends. If you're not working, what have you, if you get up at 5 o'clock on the weekdays, keep that regulated. Wake up at the same time on the weekend, but your brain loves that routine. It's going to do wonders for sleep quality. So that's the first one. And you said 3. Let's do number 2. And this is a hard one in like Western culture, letting go, but it's huge. If you can learn how to let go successfully, man, you're going to be miles ahead of the next person. Because it's like oftentimes we want to add. It's an agglutination, positivity, like more and more will make things better. Well, you can see with America, more does not make better. We're sicker than ever, and we have more than everyone else. So that's not it. So let's get less abstract with that. So with letting go, take a look at what is something during your day that does not serve you. And this can be very difficult, but it may be something that doesn't serve your goals. It could be social media. Why are you checking it when it's all about comparing yourself to others and so on and so forth? That's toxic.
It's good.
Why are you checking the news, when you're using the restroom in the mornings? What's the point? When the news it's just fear and it's just going to, make you paranoid and all of that. Do you need that first thing in the morning? Does it serve you? But my point is, and the stuck point is, you'll say, well, but I need to know what my friends are doing. I need to know what's going on in the world. Challenge that. Do you really? And then the hard part is, well, what do you do with that empty space? Now, Americans, we have a lot of trouble with that, but we need that. We need that empty space because otherwise you're not going to know who you are. You're not going to be authentic with who you are and how you can deliver what you have to other people if all you have are other people's ideas and thoughts pulling you this way or that way. So you got to look at what no longer serves you. What are you willing to let go? Cut that out, and for some people, it might not be that. It might be something else. It might be alcohol. For some people, it might be taking an extra nap. Some, it might be sleeping in an extra hour. Well, then you open up that space for that extra hour to, guess what? Meditate, exercise, but you have to let something die or cut off in order for something to grow or to be born. I mean, that's the law of nature. So I say letting go. Look at that one thing and say, well, does this serve me anymore? Get rid of it if it doesn't. Life is short. And then the other aspect too, I want to tie into discipline. Yeah. And that's to do something every day that builds that grit center in your brain, that little something that is going to be hard, but it may pay off, but it might not. And you do it anyways. And that could be if you're starting out and you haven't worked out at all, gosh, it could be doing 5 push-ups while you're on your knees. Don't really care what it is. It could be like if you thought you were going to pick up a new language or something like that, or read a new subject. Yeah, start digging in. But we're talking small increments. Just do a little bit of that. And then you'll notice over time, as you're developing a little bit more discipline, that's going to spurn forth other aspects of your life like in a positive way.
Man, that's powerful. Okay, guys. So we've got the three from Dr. Mendenhall. So sleep, letting go, and everyday grit. I wrote them down. I think those are like very actionable, easy things that we could all do a better job. I know I could do a better job of waking up the same time every day. I've personally, this might shock you because I'm in marketing, I've personally actually been off social media. I've had Facebook and Instagram on my phone for going on 7 years.
Yes, I
And
love it.
so I have not doomsday scrolled on my phone in 7 years on social. And I've gotten so much time back to actually enjoy. And guess what? I haven't missed out on life. I'm a very social person. And by removing that, I have not removed a giant part of my life. If there's something important going on, guess what? My wife tells me or somebody calls me.
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing because it's like right now we have this. Okay, so most people, if you take a step back, they'll say, yeah, our society is getting sicker, like mentally, people are getting more unhinged, unstable, all of this. But it's like there's this emptiness that's going on with people. And it really comes down to we get barraged with all of this stuff, this agglutination of these superficial experiences. Like we're living our lives in some other realm, like by watching somebody else or watching that reality show, wishing that was us. Well, what if you were off of the couch and you were actually living your own reality show? And or what if you were, like you said, you got off of social media? Now you have that empty space to become bored, which got to be comfortable with that. And then you look at the person across the room and you're like, oh, let's do something. Let's talk. Let's go on a walk. But people are losing that depth. They're losing that empty space to then develop depth, which you have to have for authenticity. So we get all these things on a surface level, like with social media, with news, with all of this, and it barrages us because we have so much bandwidth, but it's completely empty. No wonder people feel sick and vacuous. So I love that you're off of social media. I think if we could put billboards all over the place, that spoke against that said, get off of social media, it's the devil. That would be awesome because I think that really, if people were able to authentically connect with other people and have that depth, they would feel so much better. They could actually find meaning. It's a very sad thing because I think we're going in the wrong direction with society right now.
Mm, yeah, I agree. And one thing I'll add to that, I know for me personally, what's been like hearing these things and seeing some of them in practice, the act of getting up early and doing hard things. And even when we talk about that everyday grit, whether it is like running or working out, when you can do those things without a phone in your hand, what I've loved about running, because I've never run in my life. I never ran in high school, never ran in college. I just picked it up the last few years. And now I'm doing ultra marathon distances. And the reason why that's been so powerful, why I've loved it, is because I don't run. I actually don't run alone. I run with friends, and the level of our friendship is so deep because I'm spending 30 minutes to an hour every morning doing a hard thing with somebody else with no phone in hand, and you just talk. And when you have the consistency of having conversations with people you care about every day consistently with no distractions, and all you can do is talk or be quiet because you're running, it creates such a strong connection to, brain, body, friendships, all those things. It's been the biggest significant change in my life is getting up early, going on a run with friends, and not having a phone in your hand. Because guess what? Even if you have social, you can't scroll social while you're trying to survive on the road running, right?
Right, definitely. And definitely not at the distances that you're going where you're probably seeing shadows at some point. That's an impressive story. And then speaking of like neuroplasticity, the social connection also is helping you with brain health too. I forgot to bring that up
Mm.
besides the exercise part. But yeah, there's something transformative too. Like people start thinking, okay, in order for me to get in shape or this, that, or the other, I need to get my mind in shape. And that's part of it. But there's something that can happen with a bottom up transformation of working through the body as well. So getting yourself to where you're going from nothing to then being like high performing with running. Like in my case, I was in my mid 30s and I was working on an office job in psychiatry, getting lethargic, getting really overweight, feeling old. And so I was thinking, what's the hardest thing I can do? And I looked up this thing called Muay Thai. Never heard of it before, and drug one of my buddy friends, and we started doing it. And it was super hard. But guess what? It wasn't the physical part that was transformative. It was the mental part. There was something different about, and I think it has to do with that, developing that grit. It has to do with developing a certain kind of confidence, getting outside of your head. It's a meditation in and of itself whenever you're doing something like that. So I think that's something as well that people need to realize with like the resilience and all of that. Like, don't discount the power of the connection between the body and the mind, because
Mm.
you can do a lot of transformation by doing hard things with your body every day. So that's a beautiful story. I hadn't realized that you went from never running before, and now you're, like in this, I don't know, I can't even imagine how, going as long as you go. Like, I don't know how it's humanly possible. That's amazing.
Brick by brick, one step at a time.
Yeah, right.
So, Brian, I would love for everyone here to know if they want to learn more about Mindforged Psychiatry or just connect with you, kind of not let it end here. What's the best way that folks can connect with you?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So there are a few ways. I'm in the DFW area. I have a website. It is Mindforged Psychiatry. So www.mindforgedpsychiatry.com. There's a lot of info there. There's also a contact me section where you got my phone number, got my email address, so on and so forth. So that's a good way to catch up with me. Working on developing some blogs, and I'm always, I always have these little things in the back of my mind that I'm working on, and I'm working on developing some other mindfulness based stuff that I'm putting on the website. Every once in a while, you might find some useful information there, also, even if you don't want to connect. But yeah, I'm around. I'm
That's
here
great.
as a resource, and hopefully this was helpful. But this was a lot of fun, Brad. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. And guys, everybody listening, make sure if you know someone too that might be struggling with that, if they're a high performer and they're stuck in their mind, or you feel like some of this might be helpful to them, share this show, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're watching it on or listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever it is. Feel free to share. We do this for free to help others. And thanks so much to Dr. Mendenhall for being on the show and sharing these. And just as a recap of those takeaways, focus on sleep, focus on letting go, focusing on doing hard things every day. I know you guys are all capable of that and the things that we can all work on. And as we get older and better, I think we realize the importance of taking care of our brain and just how key that is to continuing to become high performers, because our bodies are getting older and dying a little bit every day. And we actually have to work this uphill battle to maintain our sharpness. And the people around us deserve that, not just for yourself, but the people that you're serving and leading, your family. They'll deserve the absolute best version of you. And that can be the biggest gift that you give them, is just by taking care of yourself and getting better. So Dr. Mendenhall, you have been awesome today. Thank you so much for sharing this. You are fantastic. And thank you guys for tuning in. This has been the Think and Grow Show, and hope to catch you guys next time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.